Everyone, and welcome to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for your time in this episode number 10, how it's been flying by. And, of course, we're getting closer to the Kentucky Derby, and today we have some special guests. As always, we'll talk with Hall of Fame jockey Jerry Bailey, now the lead analyst with NBC Sports, get his take on how the Derby picture is shaping up, as well as talk about his storied career. And I don't think there's going to be a busier man in the next few weeks anywhere around horse racing than Darren Rogers, who runs communications for Churchill Downs, takes media requests, interview requests, and I'd say there's probably 1,500 or more media requests. We'll get an exact number from him later on, but I know there's a lot that come from all walks of life, not just horse racing people, but entertainment people and news people that will be showing up for the Derby. Darren will tell us about that and about what I think has been the most interesting thing in the last 6 years. And I don't know, you could make an argument that's why the favorites are on this streak. All these favorites have been winning the Derby. That is because of this piece of paper I'm holding up, and if you're on YouTube, you can see it. If you're on the radio or listening to us on an iPad right now, you can't. But what it is the leaderboard for the Kentucky Derby, and it's a list made up basically each week of horses that have won the races where they get a point system now. It's not based entirely on earnings like it used to be. And that point system will determine the 20 horses in the field if it comes to 20. And this year it's kind of still wide open enough it might. 1975 is when they started limiting it to 20. Not always the case, but most time if you have a 3-year-old, you're going to take a shot because you never know. Ben Chafin's on lead guitar and on the couch with us this week. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Kenny. How you doing?
How do you like this leaderboard thing? I kind of like this. It reminds me, again, of the seeding process in the NCAA tournament when you look at how these races are assigned points.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, but it's interesting because the points give, each horse kind of that fair shake. Mm-hmm. It's not just one race that can make or break them, but, that points, they get their due.
Yeah, I like that they... And then obviously some races count more than others. We just saw the Louisiana Derby where a 22-1 long shot by my standards is now number one on the leaderboard because he got 100 points pulling the upset.
That's right. But, Kenny, there's still 7 more of those 100-point races. So, maybe there's some other horse could beat him out for number one.
Yeah. But, he's pretty much locked himself in now.
That's right.
And I think it's good because for a while there were some races, some $1 million races for 2-year-olds. That I think are still out there, but they counted a lot. It was how much a horse had won in his career. Right. And so you'd have a horse that maybe was just not that, was a good horse that won $1 million race, but it was a little inflated number coming in, that he wasn't the 3-year-old that he was as a 2-year-old.
Right, okay.
So that way you had it'd be like the senior in high school compared to the freshman in college maybe.
I could see that.
Unless you're Zion Williamson, who was great in high school and great in college.
That's true.
So yeah, we got big races. We got all these races coming up, which would be like Santa Anita is right. One.
The UAE.
Yeah, UAE Derby. Which is coming up soon.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see if anyone comes from Dubai, although Mendelssohn last year they thought was going to be the great horse and became much better, had trouble in the Derby. Let's see, Arkansas is going to be a big race. Bluegrass Stakes is going to be a big race. Mm-hmm. Wood Memorial is going to be a big race. Arkansas Derby, I think I mentioned them. And I like that. Because they look at the power conferences. How many top seeds are still playing, Ben? And taping this now on we're dropping it, as the kids say, on Wednesday before the Sweet 16 starts in the NCAA tournament.
Right. Now this is kind of an interesting year. This time we got all 4 number 1s and number 2s still in the Sweet 16. There's no big upset with a number 1 dropping off or number 2. So that's pretty big. In fact, the only real, I guess you could say, long shot still in the Sweet 16 is Oregon. They're number 12.
Yeah, and that was a bad seed for them. They're a lot better than number 12. They lost Bowl, their star center, in the course of the year, got injured, and now he'll be going to the NBA. But if you see Oregon, they really deserve to be I think I would put them in the top 10 right now. Not a 10 seed, but in the top 10 of the 16 still left. I think they got a good shot. You still got a bracket going?
No, mine was busted way back. I think it was the Anteaters that got me.
I should have been more clear last week, shouldn't I? I said Murray State and Cal Irvine, but I should have said the first round games. See, I got a little carried away, didn't I?
just
I didn't
just a
mean
little
that they were going to become, but, after Loyola last year and everybody still looks at VCU and all. But I did have the Anteaters in the 16, so I will take that back. I did have them, so I missed that. I had Murray State win their first game because of John Morant, who's a terrific player. I hope everybody got a chance to see him play in the NCAA tournament. He's one of those under-the-radar guys. He would be like, by my standards, you didn't know much about him, and then suddenly he just popped up. He played in the Ohio Valley Conference, didn't get a lot of attention, but he has in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and even like a little bit of the Kentucky Derby winner a couple years ago, Mind That Bird. Came out of the Sunland Derby. Didn't win the Sunland Derby,
right?
But came in fourth and then came back and won the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah. So, they can come. They don't have to come from the big ones.
That's right.
As we would say, the 7 out there that are 100 points. But year in, year out, that's who you're getting. Kind of like year in, year out, it's the major conferences winning championships. You'll have a run by a George Mason, but you're not going to have that many. So I think it works out to be fair.
Yeah. The system is balanced out.
Yeah, I like that. It's balanced, much like this show we have today, would you say?
We are definitely in balance.
We are in balance. All is good. We'll have our vet report, of course. We'll have Darren Rogers from Churchill Downs talking about all the preparation and the hours and the people that are responsible for making the Kentucky Derby the biggest day of racing. Darren will join us later, but up next, it is the Hall of Fame jockey and NBC analyst Jerry Bailey when we come back here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Glad that you're with us, watching on YouTube or listening to us on iTunes or Google Play or the Facebook page. He is one of the greats of all time. He is the lead analyst for NBC, one of the best in the business, and a friend of mine, Jerry Bailey, the Hall of Fame jockey, joins us from his home in Florida. Hello, Jerry.
Hey, Kenny. Nice to be with you.
Hey, thank you for being with us. You got your golf game in and all is good today.
Yeah, I didn't play very well, but it's a beautiful day, and I enjoy being out there.
See, we have to qualify what a Jerry Bailey day of golf would be compared to the regular people, because you're a very good golfer,
It depends on the day, Kenny. Depends on the day.
See, I say most people would be happy if they knew what you shot. Say, Jerry shot that? Gosh, I wish I could shoot that. That's what they'd say. There's a race coming up in Louisville, I've noticed, on the first Saturday in May that draws a lot of attention, and you've been on the scene. You were covering the Louisiana Derby for NBC over the weekend. More races coming up ahead. This seems like a really kind of wide-open place at the time, although we know Baffert's got 2 big horses in Game Winner and Improbable, Jerry.
Yeah, it's just like every year. I think the conversation begins with Bob Baffert and what he's got. Coming into this year, I thought that he had the clear 2 best horses in last year's 2-year-old champ Game Winner and the undefeated Improbable. I still think those 2 might be the best, but I think the separation is a lot less. Just because their schedule kind of got messed up a little bit with all the bad weather and the cancellations in Santa Anita. They didn't even run the San Felipe. So Baffert had to shift gears and go to Arkansas with his California horses. And they both ran great races. Both of them just narrowly beaten in 2 divisions of the Rebel. Improbable, I'm going to say, definitely was the best horse. He was very wide on both turns, yet beat less than a neck. Game Winner was a little wider than the winner in his race and just got beat a nose. So I would expect them to come back and run really well, if not both win. So they lost a little luster, but not much.
And this is a field, I talk about this time of the year as kind of like the March Madness for horse racing. To me, we're getting down now to that part of the schedule, like moving on in the brackets, like getting close to the Elite 8, trying to figure out who the best is with the big races coming up right now, including the Santa Anita Derby you mentioned, and the Wood, and the Arkansas, the Bluegrass. I probably missed somebody in there. The UAE Derby maybe even perhaps might have a horse coming over.
Yeah, as we go through the spring and get closer to the Derby, Kenny, we usually get some kind of clarity. Now, I would say that, I don't think much changed after the Rebel. Both those horses at Baffert look like the best. They still look like they might be the best. You got to give a lot of credit to Mandela's horse, and of course that horse Long Range Toddy. He ran a really good race in the Southwest was in a lot of trouble. So to come back and win wasn't a huge surprise. But I think those horses will come back again and be very formful. The Sunland Park Derby, which is run Sunday, I don't know if those horses can take another giant step up. Another Twist of Fate did answer a question for me.
Mm-hmm.
Can he dirt? And he certainly ran well. Probably with a little cleaner trip, would have won. I can't kill the jock on the right. He was saving ground, but he just had to kind of get shuffled back a little bit on that far turn and then come again, and just narrowly beaten as he was closing back in on Pletcher's horse, who won it, Cutting Humor. But the Louisiana Derby was just a total anomaly for me.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole day was upside down. Serengeti Empress had things her own way in the Oaks, and just, I mean, she bled, I guess is what the report was, but finished last. And the winner of the Louisiana Derby was a kind of surprise. Just had broken his maiden, by my standards is his name.
Calhoun's horse,
and,
Brett Calhoun.
Yeah, I mean, you could see Todd's horse, the second place horse Spinoff, brilliant win at Tampa by many lengths, with a lot left. So for him to come back and run that well wasn't a huge surprise. But the winner was a surprise. Now, we'll talk about the favorite, War of Will. He had a little problem about the third or fourth, maybe the fifth jump out of the gate. His back end slid out from underneath him. He dropped down. I guess he strained himself a little bit. If he comes back, he could be, a threat, but we won't see him run again. He's not going to run again before the Kentucky Derby. So you still have a question mark there. So we still got some to learn, Kenny.
Well, one thing we learned during the career of Jerry Bailey is when it's money time, there was none better. I remember the two Derby wins, Sea Hero in '93, when I think you had one of the great lines, kind of like about the sea almost parting. I'm in that ballpark, something like that, right?
Yeah. Listen, when you come from as far back in the pack as those two horses did, you
and
have
Grindstone,
to have everything go right. And, it doesn't happen often, but thank God it split at the correct times for me. And I was lucky enough to hit those holes running and had the horse that was good enough to accelerate through them. So, yeah, I got lucky in those two.
Well, sometimes you create your own luck, don't you?
I always just had a philosophy, Kenny. I'd put my horse in a spot that if he was good enough, he could win. You don't have to be Superman a lot of time on these horses. If you could just give them a chance and let them show what they got.
7-time Eclipse Award winner as a jockey. That is still a record. 15 Breeders' Cup wins, a record 5 Breeders' Cup Classics, including Cigar, who I guess may be the most identified horse with you. I don't know if that's fair to say. You've ridden some great ones. You had big victories. But Cigar and Jerry Bailey kind of are still synonymous. Looking back on that 16-race win streak in the Dubai World Cup, its first year, that was such a special time.
Yeah, he was my favorite, Kenny. He was the best horse I ever rode. He was my favorite horse. He was just, look, I was blessed to be the guy they picked to ride him. That's all I can tell you, because a lot of guys could have been on and won most, if not all, of those races. So I was the right place at the right time. And, of course, Biltmont did such a good job keeping him at a high level for so long. And it was cool. I mean, you don't see horses with that anywhere close to that kind of winning streak anymore, because they don't run as often. So, yeah, that was fun for me. It was a cool thing in history.
What was special about Cigar? I mean, we obviously can look at the numbers and see what he did, but I mean, again, of the great horses you've ridden, what really stood out about him from the obvious? He kept going to the winner's circle for you.
Well, he's what I think a lot of he had the characteristics a lot of great horses have. Tremendous amount of speed that you could harness. So he had rateable speed. He was a brilliant miler that allowed the guy on his back to settle him to the extent he would get a mile and an eighth and even a mile and a quarter. So anytime you have a horse with brilliant speed and he allows you to rate and harness that speed to a certain degree, they become almost unbeatable.
The best advice a trainer gave you was probably Andre Fabre before the '93 Breeders' Cup Classic, when you pulled the biggest upset still in Breeders' Cup history, winning aboard a 100-1 Chardar Kong.
He told me, good luck, Kenny. That's what he told me. And that's all I knew about this horse. He was from France. And, of course, there was very little video on foreign horses at the time. And the taglines in the racing forum, it didn't tell you exactly where they were at the given poles, like in American racing, or what the fractions were. So you just had a sort of an idea, that he came from back in the pack. But that's it. And that's kind of how I rode him. I just, took him to the rail and sent him back in the pack, and he started picking horses up one after another, and he was clearly the best horse in the race. I mean, I did get a very good trip, but it was as much a shock to me as it was anybody.
And that's what I like most about that is afterwards, talking to you afterwards and people then learning the story, because Fob wasn't speaking English. I don't know how fluent you are in French, but yeah, that was basically it. Good luck.
Yeah, look, I couldn't even pronounce his name. It's Arcangues, and if you can get Arcang from that, then you're better than I am. And I didn't know his name was Arcang, but I knew he ran like King Kong. So, my hat's off to that horse and that training job by a brilliant guy.
How much does a jockey rely on what a trainer is going to say? Now, obviously, relationships you've had with some of the trainers, like a Bill Mott or something over the years, I guess it's kind of almost like shorthand before you go and riders up is called. But when you're riding somebody in a big race and you know a little bit about him, I know you study the form so you understand how the race is going to break down. But do you get a whole lot of information from a trainer just before a big race?
So that's a really good question, Kenny, and I've got a perfect anecdotal story for you. I want to know the things that I cannot determine from watching a video or looking at the racing form, such as, does the horse get intimidated when he's in tight quarters? Does he like the outside better than the inside? Does he, run better if you, whip him, if you don't whip him? And most importantly, how quick is his acceleration through the race? All right. So like if you're going along and there's a hole there, 2 horse lengths in front of you, how long is it going to take you to get to that hole? Is it going to take you 3 strides? Is he instantaneous? Or is he kind of a grinder that, it takes a while for him to wind up and get back in full stride, from, a mid-race speed? So I was in Saratoga, and races are very important in Saratoga. Every win counts because most jockeys want to be leading rider at Saratoga. So there's a premium on wins there. And I was in the paddock and I was riding for Dick Dutrow, and he wasn't in the paddock at the time. His assistant was. And I said, look, I've read the form. I looked at the video. It looks like this horse comes from 6 or 7 off the pace. He makes one good late run starting, somewhere before you turn for home. The guy said, that's it. That's exactly how he likes to run. So that's how I was going to ride him. So we break, and I'm exactly, where I'm supposed to be, 5, 6, 7 lengths off the lead. We go to the far turn. I'm starting to creep up a little bit, and we turn for home, and I ask him for his best. And this horse accelerated like a rocket. And he made up 5 lengths by the 8th pole, and I'm already, drawing away a length in front. And as soon as I hit the 16th pole, he put his ears up, he stopped running, and I knew I had made the lead too soon. There was a characteristic about this horse that he idled when he made the lead, and nobody told me. And sure enough, the horse I had just passed came back and beat me by about a nose.
Wow.
So I wasn't a good loser, Kenny. I'll tell you right now. I was livid pulling up, and I'm thinking, God, all the guy had to tell me is don't make the lead too soon.
Yeah.
He pulls up. He idles when he makes the lead. So I came back, and I got off the horse, and I looked at him in a very sarcastic tone. I said, did anybody that has ridden this horse before tell you that he idles when he makes the lead? The guy said, oh, I forgot to mention that. And I said, those are the kind of things that I really need to know when I'm ridden a horse for the first time. So, yes, there are some things that I really need to know that I can't determine from video or racing form, and the trainer needs to tell me.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, because it's not like you get a whole lot of shots. I'm talking about trainers and jockeys, like you say, at a special meet like Saratoga in a big race. You'd think you'd want to tell you everything you possibly could.
Yeah. So, yes, that was a good question by you, Kenny Rice.
Well, thank you. Every now and then I have one. Not many, but, I try to save it for the big guests.
There you go.
Well, I'm going to throw this at you, too. You've given information. Ken Ramsey was on our show a few weeks ago and was giving your praise about your advice to him with Kitten's Joy way back when, and that's when he decided that he was going to make the switch. He was, dirt, and actually he wanted to try to have a derby horse or grass, and he's going back and forth. And he said if it hadn't been for Jerry Bailey, Kitten's Joy would not have had the track success that he had. That's a Ken Ramsey quote.
Yeah, I had I was riding him, and I'd gone over, and Ken said, you know what, he's a 3-year-old, so, it was in the spring, it was here at Gulfstream, and he said, would you mind coming over and working him on the dirt and tell me if you think he has any future on the dirt? I said, yeah, sure, might as well. And so I went over and he was spinning his wheels in the workout. And I told him, I said, Kenny, you're wasting your time if you can try this horse on the dirt. He's a special horse on the grass, but I think you'll be sorry if you run him on the dirt. And so he took it at face value, and what a super turf horse that horse was. I mean, he was great.
Yeah. How many times does that happen with a trainer or an owner that comes to you and says, Jerry, I really need to know. I mean, if this is just a horse, let me know. If there's some potential there, let me know. Does that happen often with you?
Yeah, not that much really, Kenny. I mean, most trainers are pretty savvy and they know. I just think that I think they knew. I think they just wanted one more confirmation, that they needed to stay where they were, and that being on the grass. But most trainers really have a pretty good idea.
I don't think there's any more athlete that is dedicated to the craft than a jockey. I really don't, in covering several sports over the years. Hall of Famer Jerry Bailey, our guest right here on the Racing Show, is certainly in that group. So dedicated that I believe you told me one time that you had a banana every day for your lunch.
That was it. Here was my daily routine, Kenny. I'd have a half a cup of coffee in the morning and a muffin, like an English muffin, maybe a bran muffin or corn muffin. Half a cup of coffee, not a whole one, because liquid was heavier than solid. So if you drank, the poundage, short term would be heavier. Lunch would be a piece of fruit, usually a banana, and then a very, very controlled dinner. And so basically, Kenny, I'm 5'5.5". I might have been 5'6" riding, so I was tall for a jockey.
Yeah.
I was basically hungry for 31 years of my career. Always a little hungry for 31 years. So I told you before, I wasn't a good loser. I was cranky. And I found out, since now that I can eat, I'm in a lot better mood when I can have a full stomach. So if you see those riders out there and they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, especially the guys that reduce hard, throw them a break.
I try. Isn't that I'm going to tell you, that's the worst thing. And I've had to do it with you in your riding days where you say, hey, Kenny, it just got beat. Talk to that runner-up that just lost by a nose. That's always I'm always that fun guy that approached you, or now several other guys, and say, what happened? What else can you say at that stage?
Yeah, it's kind of tough for us, for a jockey. I say us, I'm retired now 13 years, but usually other athletes it's at the end of the game, it's after the event, and they've had some time to assimilate their thoughts and cool down a little bit. For riders, like the race is over, and within 5 minutes, of getting off the horse, somebody's wanting to interview, and we understand that. A lot of times, we're not totally collected, and it's usually when we make a mistake. At least for me, it was usually when I made the mistake and I was mad at myself that my temper was the shortest.
You were nice to me.
Because you're a nice person, Ken.
No, but that is tough. And, that's another thing that people don't realize is because you prepare for the entire day. When you're riding 6 horses a day or whatever you were riding at that time, at the peak, you basically have almost 6 or 7 different jobs in that one day.
Yeah, I spent some guys don't spend that much time. A lot of guys do, preparing, reading the racing form and going over video. And you're right, you don't have much time between races, so you do the lion's share of it before the first race that you ride even starts. And then you might just, glance at it as a refresher. But yeah, you've got I was always at least thinking, okay, which one was this that I studied? Look, in the middle of the race, that happens sometimes. I knew the 7 horse usually gets out when he turns for home. Is that this race, or was that 2 races from now?
Yeah.
And because there's so much information that you have to absorb before the day even starts, sometimes it gets confusing. Yeah.
What's the funniest thing somebody said? What's the banter between jockeys sometimes during the actual race? Because you guys are so close together at times, even brushing at times.
Yeah, there's the typical expletive deleted out there when somebody cuts you tight and, kind of shuts you off or shaves you a little bit. But I think the funniest, and I won't mention any names, but there was a certain jockey that had the perfect trip. And it was in the pocket and waiting, just, saving ground. And all they had to do is wait till the hole opened. And this particular jockey was almost trying to shut somebody off, push somebody out just to get out of that perfect spot. And I looked over at the rider next to me and I said, look at this. This jock up there, I'd give $1,000 to be right where that rider is right now. And they're trying to shut somebody off to get out of that spot. And
yeah.
the guy next to me just started laughing, because he was probably thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talk back and forth. A lot of times what we talk is when the race is pretty much over and we're just way back in the pack and have no chance to finish in the money. But it goes on.
Jerry Bailey, not only a Hall of Fame rider, but a person as well who took a stand. It was a big stand back in 2003 when you wanted to wear Wranglers, a patch on the side of your pants. I mean, you were kind of really a breakthrough guy for all of the jockeys, because it's commonplace now to see this.
Yeah, I think that, look, there was guys that in the 1940s that took a stand for us riders to get paid our 10% to the office.
Mm-hmm.
So at critical moments during any period, that leaders and guys in the forefront will take stands to make their profession better. I just happened to be the guy that was offered to wear something in the Belmont Stakes in 2003. I took the option. I was fought a lot about it. We actually ended up going to court in Louisville over sponsorship down there, and we won. So yeah, it was a bit of a breakthrough. It was new then, and I'm glad I did it. Now the guys can wear them and make a little bit more money for themselves.
And Empire Maker was a pretty good day for you too at the Belmont that year.
It was great. He was a great horse. I mean, that was my Triple Crown horse. That's the one thing I wanted to do that I never accomplished, was win the Triple Crown. And he was the horse to do it. He just hurt his hoof on Tuesday of Derby week, and of course he finished second. And then he skipped the Preakness and then won the Belmont. But I just thought he was the best three. All due respect to the other 3-year-olds that year, Funnyside, who finished in front of him in the Derby. I just thought he was the one, and just a little unlucky. That's how hard it is to win these races, these Triple Crown races, Kenny.
Yeah.
You not only have to have the best horse, you have to be on the best horse that day. Everything has to go right for these horses. So
yeah,
that's why it's tough.
Yeah, Jerry's won it twice, won the Kentucky Derby twice, of course, Sea Hero and Grindstone. And I think that may be what makes the Derby, to me, as special as any sporting event out there, is because it is the ultimate one and done. You got one shot with that horse at the Derby. And
yeah,
like
you're
you
not
say,
coming back next year.
Yeah, Empire Maker wasn't coming back as a 4-year-old and trying it again. You just don't get that.
Right.
And I don't know. Does that put any extra pressure? Was a Derby a pressure race for you, or in more than any other big race, or did you just approach it as here's another big race?
No. Actually, there's not a lot of pressure at all, Kenny, because nobody expects you to win. The race is so hard to win that, I mean, unless you're 3 to 5, which is not often in that race.
Right.
You're not expected to win. I mean, 20 guys go out there, and you're gonna have 19 losers. So everybody knows how hard it is to win. So for me, it wasn't a pressure-packed race. It was difficult, but it wasn't pressure-packed for me.
Is it pressure-packed now that you're getting ready for the NBC show yet once again, and you're going to be studying you and Randy Moss must study nonstop, by the way, for the next 5 weeks.
This guy is, you called me the ultimate professional. Randy Moss.
Oh, he is
the most prepared and very good at what he does, but the most over-prepared person I've ever seen in my life. He's got stacks. You've seen this, Kenny.
Oh, yeah.
We're in the trailer.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what. Last Saturday is a prime example of how much Randy Moss prepares. Somebody walked through there, and we're talking. It was Randy said, I'm going to call Brett Calhoun. You want to talk to him? I said, yeah. And the horse is, he was 25 to 1. He probably should have been 50 to 1. He just broke his maiden is all he'd ever done.
Yeah.
And so Randy called him, and we talked to him, and we got the skinny on what he thought about the horse, that the horse had broken his maiden. But then it was after that he worked out so well. The light came on, so to speak, for the horse, and he was really on fire, and he liked his chances. One guy came back and said, what are you talking about that horse for? He's got no chance. And Randy looked up, he said, you never know. And
yeah.
90% of the stuff he won't use, that he prepares and the work that he does, he won't use. Only 10%. But you never know what 10%.
Yeah.
And so that's his philosophy. And I learned when I came in the game, I started partnering with Randy Moss in 2006, and we've worked together every year since. And there's no better person to teach somebody that business, the art of handicapping and analyzing races for television, and I'm just so blessed to have come up with him.
Well, it's a pleasure to work with you guys and to listen to you guys as I do throughout the course of the day. And, sometimes I'll hear something, and that'll help me later on for an interview, something that you guys said during the course of the show, even over the course of a 4-hour-and-a-half, 5-hour show like the Derby.
Yeah, it's those kind of shows fly though, Kenny. Those
do.
long shows.
Yeah.
Once you get in the rhythm of doing these races, And look, even the Breeders' Cup, which is 5 or 6 hours Friday and 6 or 7 hours on Saturday. Once you get in the flow of that and you get used to doing it, it flies. I love it. It's fun. It's really fun.
Well, Jerry, a pleasure always, and I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks in Louisville, my friend.
Okay, Kenny, thank you. And I love working with you too, by the way. You just don't happen to sit right next to me, so that's a clarification there.
Well, no, you didn't have to say that, but that was very kind of you. Yeah, you don't want to be over in the barn area. You don't want to be in the barn area, especially last year when it rained all day. I spent a lot of time more than I ever have in Shed Row just to get out of the rain, by the way. There was no respite anywhere.
I retired my reindeer and my goggles when I stopped riding and started analyzing races. So, yeah, you got that one, buddy.
All right, Jerry, thanks again, pal.
Bye-bye.
Hall of Famer Jerry Bailey joining us here. More on The Racing Show when we come back. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Dr. Brett Woodie joins us here on this, our vet segment from Rood and Riddle, our sponsor of the show. Dr. Woodie, welcome in.
Thank you very much.
From North Carolina with North Carolina State. Had to go to Ohio State University. I always say that. It seemed like all the vets went through Ohio State. But you were also in charge. You were assistant professor at the large animal surgery at Cornell University.
That's
for
correct.
Several years before coming to Kentucky about 2003. That had to be an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was. It was a very interesting experience being at Cornell.
What about the teaching when the young vets come in and they're curious, and I don't know how many want to go into large animal practice as opposed to the general practice of dogs, cats, etc. But what's some of the questions that they're really curious about, especially like with animal surgery of large animals?
A lot of it's certainly related to the gastrointestinal tract colic. Very common problem we see in horses, and even the small animal students are familiar with the terms, and they ask a lot of questions about colic and the GI tract, really.
Well, we hear a lot about colic. Sadly, some of the great horses have died because of colic problems, complications. So if you had to break down for all the laymen listening in, colic is essentially...
Colic, the definition of colic is nothing more than abdominal pain. It doesn't imply a cause, and there's been over 70 different causes of colic identified.
Wow.
So I think a lot of people think that when they say colic, it means a certain problem. It really doesn't. It's all abdominal pain, and there can be obviously a wide variety of things that can cause that. And sure you're well aware, colic's one of the number one causes of death in horses.
And you mentioned the variety of these, of a colic condition. That's why sometimes you hear about a horse getting colic and it's gone. Within like 24 hours, suddenly and shockingly, you say, wow, how did that happen? How was that not picked up earlier? But with all the incredibly trained people around working on some of these big farms, it can still happen.
It can definitely sneak up on you, but I do think you bring up a very good point. All the trained people on the farms, and that's really critical. The folks on the farm, first line of defense, picking up that these horses aren't quite right, and it can be from very, very mild signs to the horse is just not eating well, just doesn't appear to feel good, to a horse that's showing violent signs as far as throwing themselves down, rolling in the stall. It can vary from anywhere from something very, very soft and subtle to something as severe as that.
Dr. Woodie, from your experiences, can it be like humans? Some of us have a higher pain tolerance than others. Can a horse that's rolling on the ground, you go, oh, this horse cannot make it, but really just doesn't like the fact his stomach's bothering him and could be better than one that's not showing the kind of pain?
Exactly. Very, very much so. I think the horses are a lot like you and I. Somebody might have a higher pain tolerance, and we definitely see that with horses. Some are very stoic, stand there and don't really tell you the true story, and others are quite dramatic about it.
When you go, can you do surgeries on the farm? Do you have to do an emergency surgery there? Do they always have to bring you to the clinic? I would imagine Yes. They always have to come to the hospital.
They are going to come to the hospital.
I didn't know if it ever got to such a life and death situation that you had to try to perform something immediately there.
Unfortunately not. They will need to come into the hospital.
You mentioned some of the signs that we see with the way the horses can act, or simply if they've just got like an upset stomach. Do they call immediately, or is that what you would advise anybody at the farm, no matter how much experience, just to call immediately, try to bring them in and get this checked?
The vast majority of horses that are showing signs of colic are treated and managed at the farm. If you had to put a number on, probably 90% of them resolve with medical treatment at the farm. Yeah, so when you're in a referral hospital, it certainly looks like every horse that that colics comes in, because obviously we do see a fair number, but the vast majority of them are treated at the farm, and so the farm's going to contact their veterinarian, and their veterinarian will examine the horse and treat as needed.
Well, I'll talk with Dr. Brett Woodie from Rood and Riddle. Colic would be your specialty, I guess.
That's
one of the
things I work on.
So to treat a horse with colic, and I don't want to make light of this situation because it can be a life and death situation, but does it can be as simple if you catch it in time, like you give them the equivalent of a Pepto-Bismol or a Tums that humans would take if their stomach's a little out of whack? And
sure, I mean it can be as simple as some analgesic drugs, some pain relief. If that's not getting the job done, then they may require intravenous fluids, and depending on what other signs they may show, they may require laxatives or something equivalent of Pepto-Bismol.
Yeah, and I'll mention Rolaids too in case they're listening and want to be a sponsor. I think I got most of the antacids accomplished there with that. Surgery, if it comes to surgery, I guess now we're at the critical stage, right? If you have to actually put them on the table and start cutting, then that's really when it's life and death.
Well, it's certainly horses that aren't responding to medical treatment and not resolving, then surgery would be the next step. And if you look at survival rates in horses with colic, now they're better than they've ever been. And somebody said, well, why is that? Well, I think a lot of it, you already touched on, early identification at the farm. So folks are picking it up sooner, getting the horses examined sooner, treated quicker, and those that need to come to the hospital are getting to referral centers much sooner, and they're going to surgery quicker if they need to. Historically, folks didn't do that. Surgery was sort of the end of the line, the last ditch. And a lot of times the horses were so sick at that point, they didn't do well. So surgery kind of had a bad name. Oh, the horses that have colic surgery don't survive. Well, when things started moving forward and treated quicker, then surgeries obviously can be a life-saving procedure in those cases.
Is a horse that's more active, let's say a racehorse, as compared to a stallion that's out in the field, some running in the field, in the stalls a lot, going back and forth to the breeding shed, are they more susceptible to colic than, say, a horse that's in training, out running all the time, getting ready for a big race? I know it can happen to both. I don't know if there's a statistic that shows one or the other.
Not necessarily. I think horses that are in regular work, regular exercise, whatever that may be for them, I think those are less likely to have a problem as compared to the horse that's solely stall confined.
How many cases do you deal with on average a year of colic? I'm asking you specific. I mean, you got a ballpark? Is it a common thing?
It's very common.
Is it like once a week somebody's going to ask you, twice a week somebody's going to, if not performing a surgery, at least asking you?
No, it's can be as much as every day.
Really?
Depending on the time of year. Matter of fact, before coming over here today, I took in 2 cases for colic. So it is a common occurrence.
Is there a more specific time of year where you people are more concerned about colic? Is it?
Well, certainly spring, spring time of the year, especially when the green grass is starting. Not that we've got that yet, but that time of year certainly we see an increase, especially in the post-foaling brood mares. Very common population to experience colic.
Oh, okay. The brood mares. I hadn't thought about that. That would kind of make sense, I think, in a way.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean,
it's one of the high risk groups are the post-foaling mares.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. I know you've been busy and you came out, and we appreciate you stopping by.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Brett Woodie from Rood and Riddle, and we'll be back with more of the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show, and we thank you for tuning in on the YouTube channel, listening to us on Google Play or iTunes, following us on Facebook, and of course, like us, because that's so important in this day and age of social media, as we have found out. And thanks to our listeners at the Ville 93.9 in Louisville. And we go to Louisville now because a guy that everybody likes, he is the most accommodating person in all of public relations, the Senior Director of Communications and Media Services at Churchill Downs. And he joins us now, Darren Rogers. Darren, thanks for being on.
Kenny, a pleasure to be on. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, and I should ask you that because I imagine at this particular time it is all fairly quiet at Churchill Downs in what's going to be just for all of us a madhouse over the next month as we get closer to the biggest horse racing day of the year.
Well, it's controlled chaos around here. You know, anytime you get within 6 weeks of the Kentucky Derby, we're working feverishly to prepare to host, more than 170,000 fans on Derby Day. It's a tremendous week of racing. It's amazing how much, the Kentucky Oaks has grown in the last decade, with more than 125,000 people and, approximately $50 million wagered on a Friday afternoon. That day is huge. And the day before that, we've branded as Thurby. So, we've had, 50,000 people on hand the Thursday of Derby week. And so that entire week has really grown in recent years. And so, yes, we're preparing feverishly with our team here on track. And then, when it's all said and done, you get to Derby Day. It's about 11 to 12,000 employees / vendors, volunteers that help put the show on.
Wow. And I can remember the day, which really isn't all that far back, where Friday was the day that Louisvillians and Kentuckians went. That was kind of like the local day. There was 50, 60,000, maybe 70,000 to be a big crowd. Not that far back. But like you say, the Oaks now, I believe, is still the second most attended horse race, obviously behind the Derby. I believe it still is the second most. It's right there around the Preakness or maybe ahead of it some years.
Yeah, the Preakness usually gets us in recent years. And then, with the cap now on the Belmont Stakes, whether or not there's a Triple Crown on the line, we're usually a strong three. But the amazing thing, the Derby week attendance, you go back, let's just go back 9 years ago or 10 years ago, 2009, 325,000, over the week. We're up to about 376,000 now. So it really is, it's grown tremendously. And the betting on that week, $218.9 million on our races. Last year it was $285 million. So you've really seen growth. Or actually, I take that back. Last year we were $311 million. So, I mean, it's about an extra 100,000 or $100 million in wagers in a decade. That's pretty significant growth in 10 years' time.
Darren, it's amazing to me how the Derby has grown, and I've been watching it since the 80s in person. Grew up as a kid watching the Derby, but being there in person, I'm not sure exactly what took off, but it certainly has. And I think if you go back to, when the Colonel was bringing people in, Matt Wynn was bringing people in and making the Derby something special and bringing all the big-time sports writers into Kentucky way back when, he would probably be stunned at the growth. People probably 30 years ago would be stunned at the growth of the Derby as it is now.
It really is. And you know what? I'm not saying this because you're online, but the partnership with NBC Sports has helped. It's been a great team. And, we've tried to grow it simultaneously beyond the sports pages. Let's celebrate the traditions. I've always believed that the Kentucky Derby, it's America's most extravagant and glamorous springtime sports party. I mean, it's the greatest party you're going to have after a Super Bowl party in early February. And you have the food, you have the fashion. There aren't many sports out there that have a 50-50 male-female demographic.
Right.
The Derby is one of them. And I'm sure you could speak to it. The only other one I believe is ice skating at the Olympics.
Yeah,
it
that's
just
it.
doesn't happen. So with the record hours of programming on NBC, people love to sit down, watch the stories, behind the scenes about the participants. But it really appeals to all different walks of life, of people seeing celebrities and the different, from how to make a derby pie and a hot brown and making a mint julep. It's just it's pretty special. And again, it really appeals to all different walks of life. That's the beautiful sport of horse racing. Non-traditional racetrack patrons. You have the affluent, to the aspirants, and to the blue collar workers and the party crowd. It really is all walks.
What I've enjoyed about this lately is the way things continue to evolve, and you're a big part of that because you're the guy that keeps up with what I read each week, and I think everybody in horse racing keeps up with each week. That is the Derby leaderboard. And as I was talking earlier in the show, I've always likened it recently with the point structure that's come about in the last few years to basically like NCAA tournament seeding. We've had one. Yeah, we had the Derby had the Louisiana Derby was a 100-point race, and we still have, Florida, Bluegrass, Arkansas, UAE, Santa Anita, Wood. I know I didn't do that in order, but they're all 100-point races. To the winner goes 100 points, and the point system in what used to be the money earning system has become the thing now. And I don't know, coincidentally or not, but we've had a string of favorites winning the Derby where we had long gap where the favorite was almost automatically throw them out because they weren't going to win the Derby. And now that's not the case.
Yeah, it's not the case. And it could be this year, though. I mean, at this point, and let me backtrack a little bit to something you said. To me, it reminds me a little bit of the basketball tournament in the sense that we've just finished the regional semifinals. Now we're into the regional finals. And you're trying to get to the Derby itself, although there's 20. That's our version of the Final Four in a way. The point system, which was instituted 6 years ago, or 2013 was the first year that we instituted it. What it did, it puts an emphasis on recent form, and it de-emphasizes, 2-year-old form. And in the old days, based on the amount of money a racetrack could throw at a given purse of a race, you might be in on scholarship, by winning, for example, say the Delta jackpot back in late November. We didn't believe that was the best. As stewards of the Kentucky Derby here at Churchill Downs, our mission since dating back to probably when the race was invented, we're trying to assemble the finest group of 3-year-olds and currently set to go a mile and a quarter on dirt on the first Saturday in May. And so we've lost some of the sprinters, we've lost some of the grass horses, those that were able to transfer to that form to dirt against open company. That's helped change the pace a little bit in the race, right? So. Right. It's a little more formful. I contend, however, it has to be, Kenny, a statistical anomaly that we've had 6 consecutive favorites with 6 years in the point system. There's no way a point system would make it any easier for a horse to compete going a mile and a quarter with 20 horses in the field. I refuse to buy that.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I think it makes, probably from handicapper standpoint, maybe they get a little better sense, but I'm with you on that. I just don't think it has mattered in my opinion, but I don't know if it's mattered that much that's automatic.
Yeah. It's, and at this stage, again, we're coming up within 5 weeks out. It's a, we don't have any standouts at this stage. I do believe that, it's we have the possibilities with these big races coming up that some of these horses are going to step forward and maybe grab that headline. I still believe Bob Baffert's two horses, Game Winner and Improbable, are the two most logical ones to beat. And as you know, a good coach, gets an athlete to be at its best when the best is needed most. And right now, the best is not needed for a Game Winner and Improbable. Bob Baffert, who's won the Derby, by the way, 5 times, looking to tie Ben Jones at 6 this year. I would fully expect Game Winner and Improbable to move forward and not be at their best. Move forward, but be close when they make their respective starts in the Santa Anita Derby and the Arkansas Derby. So it'll be interesting to see how it shapes up over the next 5 weeks, but over these next 3 weekends in particular. We might have a big type of favorite emerge. Who knows?
Yeah, we're talking with Darren Rogers, who will be the busiest man at Churchill Downs. I don't care what anybody else says that day, because guys like me will be calling him up and saying, I think it's about a quarter of a mile from the back stretch where I am now walking over. I think I called you that, didn't I, last year or the year before, and asked you. We're trying to mark it off on the walkover, which is still my favorite part of the whole Derby show I'm part of, is that walkover, because I know 170,000 people are there. All the trainers know they're there, but once they start walking over there, Darren, and you see it unfolding right before your eyes, it's still a sight, no matter how many times I've done it, and it's been a few dozen now. There's something special about that walkover that I would say is unique to all the other sports events.
It is, and it's quite a view. Are you aware that I've never made the walkover?
Well, I was going to ask you because you happen to be busy taking care of a few hundred press people and all the other requests that you get, so you don't have the opportunity to come over and hang out in the barns with me all afternoon and walk over.
No, we have, at that time, I'm usually positioned right as the horses turn from the racetrack into the paddock runway as they go into the paddock. And we have, people don't realize the amount of meetings that we go through talking about different subjects, and the walkover is one of them. We want the owners and trainers to have this memorable experience, but the number of people on that racetrack with 20, amped up athletes, these horses, we take that horse safety and concern. And I in particular, I always like to go right into that paddock runway at the tunnel to make sure people are moving, make sure people are aware that they have a hind quarter that could kick at any given moment right up against them. That's one of those things that we deal with. But we were trying to trace back the history of the walkover and when did it start to become really big, and we haven't gotten a definitive answer, but we believe it was in the late 70s with Seattle Slew that it looks like it started to really build, and what it is today. I mean, it's definitely one of those great traditions in sport.
And you come walk over with me this year.
You know what? This is Derby number 12 for me, and at some point I do want to experience it. And more from a curiosity standpoint, from operations. Yeah. I mean, the horses convene over in the chute at the 3/4 pole. We do time it and choreograph it with a timeline. But I've heard so many great stories from speaking with owners and trainers about the proximity of those fans right there on the rail and the box seat sections of people cheering them on, especially those that are born and raised here in Louisville. How special of a, first of all, it's special for any owner or trainer, even the breeders who have invested in this game, to have that opportunity to think about this. You're one of 20 horses that have qualified among a crop of about 22,000 plus. and you nominate, it's usually around 360 horses ended up being nominated. These are the 20 best. Unfortunately, we can only end with one winner, and there's 19 people frustrated at the end. But what a special moment, just the whole day. And so anyway, it's a fabulous tradition, that walkover, where it's probably the last great moment they have, right?
Yeah,
because
everybody's a winner.
Highs.
Yeah, everybody's a winner at that stage.
Yeah, and even when you're in the paddock, you might be getting a little more nervous,
yeah.
and then you're working your way back to the box seats. But everybody's a winner at that stage, and it's a memorable moment, and it makes for great pictures on TV.
And you can call Darren Rogers and just ask him for credentials, as many as you need.
That's right. We're open for business, folks.
How many credential requests will you get, pal?
We usually get around 2,200 credentialed members of the media at the Kentucky Derby, and it's from about 250 different media outlets.
Wow. And,
yeah,
and you get them from the entertainment reporters. It's not, and the guys that cover basketball, and it's not just the horse. If it were just the horse crowd, you wouldn't have that many requests, obviously. I mean, there's not that many people covering horse racing on a day-to-day basis, but you get all the sports writers, you get the entertainment writers, you get the news reporters coming in.
Major networks, yeah.
Yeah, all the networks. It brings it together probably more than any other sporting event, I could say, this side of the Super Bowl.
Well, the Super Bowl, I'm sure, gets it. I would imagine the most, the major sporting events would get it. But actually, you bring up a point because, again, and it's been a focus on our company's part, is let's take the Derby beyond the sports page. Let's go, seek the entertainment. Just think about the Kentucky Derby red carpet alone. I mean, TMZ is probably going to be coming this year. That wouldn't ordinarily happen if you didn't have a red carpet. Those are good things for the sport. We have our hands full over the next 6 weeks.
And now, have you noticed much of an impact now with the invitation that can be extended on the Kentucky Derby Road through Europe and the Kentucky Derby Road through Japan now? We had Lonnie a couple of years ago, almost Gronkowski last year. Have you noticed a buzz even more worldwide with this opening up?
We do, and it's especially when you get a participant from one of those locales. Especially, anytime the UAE Derby comes over here, we're usually, the NBC broadcast is being shown in Dubai.
Right. And
they bring a set out here, and they have their own anchors, and utilizing some of the pictures from NBC Sports, etc. But they have their own set, along those lines. The same thing with the Coolmore contingency. We've seen folks from Ireland, especially last year, when Mendelssohn looked like he had a live shot.
Right.
People don't realize that the Breeders' Cup actually gets much more of an international racing media representation than the Kentucky Derby does. But in large part, it's because of Europe on Kentucky Derby Day. They're running the English 2,000 Guineas,
right.
Which is a major race. But when Mendelssohn was here a year ago, we had a very large number. When Lonnie was here from Japan, we had a very large number of folks from Japan that came in to cover the race. So yes, there is an interest there. We're carving out a spot for a horse from Europe or Japan, whether or not the invitation is accepted or given. But we do believe in growing that international market and the popularity of the Kentucky Derby.
Darren, thank you so much for your time. I know it's very precious as we get closer to the Derby, and great insight as always. I thank you for being on with us today.
Kenny, it's always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
I look forward to it always. Darren Rogers, as good as it gets when you talk about public relations and people that keep everything together when all is chaotic around him. He is as good as it gets. Darren Rogers from Churchill Downs. We'll be back with more. Stay with us. This is the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. We thank you for being with us again this week. Thank you for responding to us. You can follow us at Horse Racing Show on Twitter. Be sure to send in your questions. We'll try to get to everybody. And you can also follow and like us on Facebook as well. And you can follow us on other social media as Ben Chaffins is taking a picture of me right now as I talk to you.
That's right, Kenny. You can see these on all our social media.
Wow, just like that.
That's right.
Wow.
We'll have those up.
How about that? I can't wait to see me.
Hey, you guys should, hashtag the Horse Racing Show when you see that picture. So that way we know that you caught that picture.
And you know it's a show that's about horse racing and yet so much more. As we've taken you almost to the Final Four now.
That's right.
And Duke's going to win it all.
Probably.
That's what I picked.
Yes.
That's what I picked. I can't say that I'm really having a best year. I think I'm 13 out of 16 of the 16 left.
Well,
it's not a bad year, but it's not a great year.
You're not busted yet.
I'm kind of hanging out. I've kind of got hung out at the quarter pole. I don't know if I have a run left in me or not. It would take Duke, North Carolina to meet in the finals, Texas Tech to get in there, and Tennessee. That would be my Final Four.
Well, that's possible.
That would be it. As far as the Derby, as we heard from Gary Stevens and we heard from Darren Rogers today, great insight from both of them. Still don't ever discount the Bob Baffert horses. Improbable is going to be in the Arkansas Derby, and the Santa Anita Derby is going to be game winner, the 2-year-old champ. Who knows who else will pop up? Maybe we're going to have another Omaha Beach that came along and has certainly vaulted into some of the top of the list in some people's opinion, or near the top after pulling off maybe of a surprise to most in the Rebel Stakes. And then, of course, by my standards, just a week ago, winning for Brett Calhoun down in the Louisiana Derby. That's why it is a madness month, not just for those dribbling up and down the court, but those running around the track with horseshoes on. Wouldn't you say, Ben?
I would say that is spot on, Kenny.
I like that, don't you?
I do, yeah.
I mean, I like to break it up and just have it's fun. It's fun to watch from a distance,
You could say it's just madness.
If I had a horse in it, I'd be a nervous wreck. If I owned a horse in it,
would.
I'd be a nervous wreck. But we're not. We're just laid back and ready to go for episode number 11 coming your way next week.
That's
Again, thank you for tuning in. Again, follow us on social media. Where, Ben?
Well, Twitter at Horse Racing Show. Of course, we're on Instagram, Horse Racing Show. And, YouTube, The Horse Racing Show. And Facebook, of course, like us.
Oh, please like us. It's so important.
Yeah.
Do you like me? Wow, what a soft country we've become. Used to, you just did your thing. Now you want everybody to like you.
Yep, like and subscribe.
Okay, like and subscribe us because we like you and we thank you for your time this week. We look forward to talking more horses with you next week here on the Horse Racing Show. Until then, I'm Kenny Rice. So long, everyone.